Hello, I'm Cecilia Louie of Paper Zen. In this video, I'll be showing you how to outline the uppercase letter X. All the letters of the alphabet are in my ebooks, Quilling Uppercase and Lowercase Letters. Visit my blog to download a free template of the letter A and give it a try. The links are in the notes below this video. I already have my strips ready to go. It's pretty straightforward because there are no curved sections too. Now my book comes with a 6-inch square pattern. In this case, I really wanted to make it fit a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch rectangular gift card. And I'll let you download this template so that if you have any other letter that you want to fit in this size, you go right ahead and download that. This is the baseline, this is the center line, so you just match up the letter from my book and it'll be easy peasy for you. Now, you'll be wondering, why is it that she's using cream colored paper on a cream colored stock? And that's because I want the outline to kind of drop away. It's there, but I want it to be subtle. So I want the decoration on the inside to really pop right out. I've already transferred my letter to my card, and if you don't know how to do that, you can watch some of my earlier videos. Before I start to glue any strips down to my work surface, I'll tend to study the letter first. And in this case, because we've got this straight edge going on, I'm going to give myself a helping hand by using a stiff card and some removable tape and putting this down to my work surface to act as a ruler. This way, when I put these edges against the card, I won't have any of them doing this, and your eye is going to be able to see that right away. So I'm just going to start with those parts first. I have some glue here that I've smeared down, and if you wonder why I smear my glue, you can watch my other video about glue on YouTube. I'll link to that in the show notes or up in the upper right hand corner. So I'm going to strategically dip in my glue and set this down. And I find sometimes I'll run my tool just along that edge just to make sure all the edges come into good contact with my card. Now I can bring this glue puddle over to this side and again strategically dip right in that corner just along that straight edge. And again, set that in place. So now this card has served its function. We'll just remove him for now. And because these are corners, it's really easy for me to just bend them out of the way for now as I slip this card underneath the V. And I'm just giving a gentle tug towards the left as I set this down. So this way, I try to make my strips as straight as I can. So now these corners can come back. It's really easy to do so. Doesn't stress out the paper at all. And my glue is kind of on the wrong side of the card, but I think I can manage. And then we repeat on the opposite side. Now, when you're tackling one segment at a time, it really does make it easier to take that guesswork out. Okay, so now we've just got our last strip. Okay, we've got our first strip done. Now, just like up above, we're going to put the ruler back in place to give us a helping hand. Okay, and then I'm going to dip just this portion. And then again, just this straight edge here. So just like before, we can remove this guy. He's served its purpose. Now, before I do this last join, I'm just going to test that it's going to meet up. Sometimes you can be off just a little bit. And while this glue here is still somewhat damp, you still have some maneuverability. I'm falling just a bit short, so if I stretch it a bit, I think it'll work. You know, you might wonder, well, why would you fall a bit short? Well, you know, I am human. We are all human. Unless you've got a machine to figure out all this cutting for you, you might be off just like a few millimeters here and there, and that does affect how you meet up with those corners. And then just because I want to, I'm already here, so I'm just going to gather a little bit of glue, about that much, and run it along this side here and bring those edges together. And then we'll do the same for this side. And don't worry, I know that this is still, you know, not glued down. We'll come back to that. And you might wonder, well, why didn't you decide to, you know, add glue to this before continuing to this strip while you had this here? And that's because sometimes the bulk of this is, you know, it's kind of high. So I find, you know, when I try to get in there, it's a little offset, and you know, you can make it work, and you can certainly choose to do that if you want to. But I guess for me, I'd rather just put something else in there instead. And I'll show you how I go about doing that. So to get in here, I'm just going to use a thinner strip of paper, and I'm just going to smear this glue flat. Make sure that there isn't any glue on the edges here. If there is, you know, just take it off with your fingers and wipe it off with some tissue on hand. And now this is going to allow you to get into these hard to reach areas. Now with my right hand, I'm trying to keep this part of the strip up in the air so that I don't smear glue on my work surface. And that's how we get the last strip down. Now, in case you guys think that I'm absolutely perfect, I'm not. I'm just going to point out something that I found a flaw in, and that is because I really wanted this join to be exact, and so I sacrificed a little bit of this corner here, and that was because I was able to do that because this glue was still slightly damp. So, you know, you might be saying, oh, you're kidding, you're going into that kind of detail. I just want to show you and be upfront and honest. My work is not perfect, okay? So if yours is a little off, don't worry, no one's going to notice, because your design on the inside is going to look amazing. So just so you can see what I'm talking about, do you see how that little corner tips up a little bit to make this part, you know, join? So this is, to me, the lesser of two evils. And, you know, maybe next time I'll make sure I, you know, cut this strip a little longer, a little bit more precise. But these kind of little variances, this is what makes this, you know, handmade art. It's a little off. We're not perfect. Okay. So let your breath out. It's okay. So just so you know, I'm not perfect. Okay. Keep going, you guys. I was imagining putting a little pine cone in here, and I just want to show you quickly how to make that. I just start with a strip of paper. I didn't measure anything. I just kind of eyeballed things. So I knew I wanted it to fit in this space and take up a certain amount of room. So I just kind of eyeball like that. And that's where I snipped the paper. And I've already softened my strip. I just dip it into some glue. That's a bit too much glue. So I'll just take a little bit off, and then I'll bring these two edges together. And with my fingers on either side of the edges of my strip, I make sure that those corners are aligned. So I just made a teardrop kind of outline here. Let's just see how it's shaping up inside the letter. And you know, it is somewhat flexible, so you know, you can imagine how much space is it going to take up. Is it too big? If it is, then you know, it's really easy to just take a pair of scissors and just trim that down a bit, and you'll have less space, but you know, you don't have to start from scratch again. So then from there, I just take, you know, another strip of brown, and I will curl that and just try to imagine, is it, you know, going to take up that much space? Okay, so then I just put my fingernail there, and that's where I'll snip. I'll just make sure I accentuate the curve and place it in place. And if I like what I see, then that's when I dip these two edges. And then I glue it in place. Then you can start to continue on with that same shape throughout, like you meet it halfway here, start from the midway here, and then do another loop and another loop, and that's how you continue on to create this shape. Okay, so I wanted to put a pine needle branch all the way on this length here, and to do that I just, first of all, I always pre-soften my strip, and so I'm imagining like a curve of that length, and so I just kind of pinched right here, and because this is the main branch, I wanted to give it some weight. So what I did was I doubled the strip just on this one branch, and then I decided, okay, well, I want one pine needle to come out about there. So I just kind of snip the excess. And I decide, okay, I want the curve to go like that, and one pine needle like that. So that's how I had imagined that first strip. Then I'm going to add some glue along this strip. And this is the shorter of the two, so actually I shouldn't be adding glue to here. I should be adding glue to the shorter part, because if otherwise your eye could just keep going with glue and you realize, oh no, I put glue on the visible part. So let's not do that. Don't do what I do, folks. Do as I say, not as I do. And just make sure that you squeeze out any air and any excess glue. And make any adjustments that you want while the glue is fresh. And that's how I started off with that branch. And then, you know, from there you can decide, in my case, I decided I wanted a strip to come this way. So you just kind of put it along inside this shape and see where it falls, and then that's where you put your fingernails, and then that's where you make your cut. And that's how you add another branch here, and you decide, do I want bristles to come out this way? But basically you just put it down in the spot that you want. You know, do I want the pine cone to be here and some bristles coming out this way? And that's how you just kind of make your snip. And then imagine it in that area. And I find, you know, like, I don't know, when I was in elementary school, I would tend to make drawings of pine cones on people's, you know, greeting cards, and I would just kind of always do the typical kind of, you know, pine cone looking thing with the berries, and that was always my typical thing. And when I actually looked around in my neighborhood and found some pine branches, I realized there's so many more parts to it. There's like the fine young needles that are just starting out. The needles are not always so perfect like this. Not that some of them are, but some of them aren't. And I find that I like it when it's going a little off from one another and they're not so perfect. When they're perfect and symmetrical, it does create a lovely harmony, but it's also kind of boring. So I like these new shoots here, and this guy's going off in his own direction, and this guy's kind of going this way. And I find that that gives more life. And then you sprinkle some berries in at the end. And if you haven't seen how to do, exact circles, what I did was I just wrapped it around my needle. You can watch some of my earlier videos. I'll leave a link in the notes below, and you can watch how I made those berries. So I thought I'd share some of the inspiration that I found on a little walk around my neighborhood, and I just thought it was so funny how the pine needles in real life are so different from what I had in my head and my imagination. So here I noticed that you see that little troll hair, it grows completely differently than it does here along this branch, and these needles are longer and taper as they get to the tip. And when you turn it over, look how different the color looks. So it's just, sparks my imagination when I look at things like that. And then just, down the path, there was a different kind of pine tree. And look how different these needles are growing, so long in comparison to these shorter ones. And then look at the pine cones that are going on. They're green. I guess this is maybe the younger stage that they are, so I thought that was interesting. You don't always see them as brown, even though I always draw them in brown. So I hope you take a quick walk around your neighborhood and get inspired by nature. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, or even better, leave me a comment. I love knowing which tip you enjoyed most or how it's helped you in your quilling. Hearing your enthusiasm is what gives me energy. I'd also love to see your work, so tag me in your photos.